Welcome to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to inspiring midlife women to feel more connected to their bodies, pleasure, and power through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, and my intention with every conversation is for you to shift the way you think and feel about your pleasure, sex, and menopause, and have you be the best advocate for your body in and out of the bedroom. I want to leave you feeling that pleasure has no age limit or expiration date. In today's episode, we are talking all about the anatomy of female pleasure, what it is, how to find it, what it feels like, and why it's so important for women in midlife. And to expertly guide us in this conversation is Sheri Winston, a holistic sexuality teacher for over 20 years. She is the author of the award winning book, Women's Anatomy of Arousal, which is always at the top of my recommended reading list. She's also the founder of the Intimate Arts Center, where she offers pleasure centered sex ed for grown-ups. Welcome, Sheri.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. I have taken your courses, read and recommended your book a number of times. And each time I dive into your material and experience it for myself, I am in total awe of the immense pleasure and power that female bodies hold. And in gratitude to you for bringing this to light for so many of us. Can you please share with our listeners how and why you landed in this beautiful body of work around female sexual pleasure and arousal?
Well, I will try to tell the short version of the story, although there's really quite a lot to it. But the short version is I started out thinking I was going to be an artist. Quickly decided that was my path, at least not for making money. And I went to massage school knowing I was going into some sort of healing art, but I didn't know which one. But I was drawn to midwifery. I was considering becoming a doctor and all these other things, but I was very drawn to midwifery. And then I was lucky enough to have a client who got pregnant, and I worked on her during her pregnancy. She invited me to her home birth. That was it. The heavens opened up, and my path just was right there in front of me. I was like, "This is it." So, unfortunately, in the United States, in order to be a midwife, you've got to become a nurse first. And I didn't really want to do that. So I became a childbirth educator. I apprenticed with home birth midwives. I did a lot of training outside the regular medical system. And then after a couple of years, I went, "Oh, all right, I'll do it. I'll go to nursing school." And it's a 4 year, you need a 4 year bachelor's in nursing. So I did that. And you have to work in the field for a couple of years. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And I finally got there, and I was a midwife, a certified nurse midwife, gynecology practitioner, all the other things. So, I loved my work. I did it. It was my passion and my calling. And I recognized there's going to be a certain point in my life where I was not going to want to wake up in the middle of the night and go attend births. And I always envisioned that at that point I would be teaching, but I would be teaching midwifery. But it's not quite how it worked out. So I indeed got to that point where I was kind of burnt out from the being on call for 20 years. And I stopped doing midwifery, and I was just doing gynecology, working in clinics, and which I like. And I knew I was taking great care of women, but I wasn't waking up and going, "Oh, I get to go to the clinic today." It just
Mhm.
wasn't juicing me up the way birth used to do. Now, all along the line, I'd been teaching childbirth stuff, and then what I called women craft classes about menstrual health, things like that. And at that point, I added a class for women about how to have better orgasms.
Mm.
And oh my gosh, was that fun? So now, on a day I knew I was teaching, I was just juicy and jazzed up and excited. And then my guy friends said they wanted to come to the class. I'm like, "No, you can't come. It's just for women." They're like, "But we partner with women. We want to know how to make them happy." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, all right, I'll teach a class for you guys about female sexuality." I did that, and what fun was that? If you are a woman who partners with men, you know what I mean about the idea of
Mm.
sitting in front of a room full of men and having them listen to every single word you say with great attention. It's
But it's
delightful.
unnecessary, isn't it?
Oh, well, yeah, because how are they going to know? We don't teach them. And if we
Mm.
don't know about our own bodies and our pleasure and how they work, how are we going to teach them?
Mm.
We also have these weird cultural myths that somehow, if we're in a heterosexual relationship, that our partners know how to please us. If they loved us, they would know how to give us orgasms. How it works, right? They've
Mm.
got different plumbing, different wiring, and what works for them may not work for us. And nobody explains that. Anyway, so I did. I explained that. And then it just kept growing and the curriculum kept expanding. And it became clear to me that my second calling in life was to be what I think of now as a midwife of people's sexuality.
Oh, I love that.
And the funny thing is, when I would tell people I'm a sex teacher and I used to be a midwife, people would go, "What? That's weird." I'm like, "Really? Because before the baby came the sex, just saying, they're kind of connected." And in fact, they're even more deeply connected than I understood.
Mm.
Because birth is really a sexual act in a way. It's part of our sexuality. And, so there's all these connections. In fact, one of my classes is called The Ecstatic Journeys of Birth and Sex,
Mm.
about how they're all really integrated in the same thing. So that's how I got to be doing what I'm doing now. And I've been doing this now for, I don't know, 25 years, something like that. Wrote a couple of books. I'm semi-retired. I'm not teaching live anymore because of various things, but I get to do stuff like this and share on podcasts. And so here I am. And that's how I got here.
Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful journey and for gifting us this incredible book. One of the books that I mentioned earlier. I know you've authored several books, but The Woman's Anatomy of Arousal. In this book, you give us some fascinating background and factual evidence about the origins and history of female sexual anatomy and why it has been often erased from history, from medical and scientific textbooks. I'd love for you to walk us through a little bit of that history. I know it's vast, and tell us
Mhm.
why we haven't been taught this. Why don't we know more about this?
I know it's crazy. What century are we living in? Well, I guess if you're in Arizona, you're living in the 1800s. But for most of us, I think we're in this century, but our knowledge of the female body and particularly female genitalia is sorely lacking. And there's a number of different reasons. There's the fact that female bodies have been devalued and not studied. This is historical. It is still the case. Diseases that primarily or only affect female bodies are studied much less, given much less money to study them than male bodies. Medications, surprisingly enough, acts differently in those two different kinds of bodies, and yet many of the drugs have only been studied in male bodies. And this is historical. This goes way, way, way back. So the male body was considered the norm, and the female body was a inferior and somewhat defective version. Now we can go back 500 years for some of this stuff. This idea that female bodies were a defective variation, an inadequate, imperfect variation of the male body. The irony being that embryologically speaking, the female body is the default setting.
Mm.
We're actually the norm. Um, so what happened to this information? Well, a lot of it, everything I talk about in that book was discovered at some point and then it vanished. Did it just get lost? Did it just wander out of the diagrams in the textbooks? Some of it was censored. I'm sure some of it was taken on purpose out. Some of it was removed. It was devalued. It just did seem to get lost. And then we also have a problem when the information is incorrect, but it's what is taught to healthcare providers. And they learned it in school, so it must be the way it is. And then they teach the next generation of doctors and anatomists and healthcare providers. And And then everyone believes it because, well, that's how it's always been. And everybody knows that's how it is, even if it's not. So we've got this problem with information that's incorrect, information that's just missing. And of course, this is all tied up with our cultural ideas about women and female sexuality. What's very interesting is if we kind of look at the arc of history, if we go back 500, 1,000 years, the female sex was considered more sexual, more lusty, ravenous, uncontrollable, in fact. This is often why we have these sort of cultural controls of female sexuality, because we couldn't be expected to control it ourselves because we were so lusty.
Mm.
So we had that. Um, and at that point, men were considered more pure and spiritual and logical and reasonable and smart. We were just kind of dumb and sexy little sluts, basically. So fast forward to 1800 in Europe, countries like England, and females were considered to not have a libido at all. Now, keep in mind there's a race and class issue here as well. So when we say women had no sexual desire, they were talking about upper class white women, right? So women of color, poor women, well, those could be the sex workers, those could be the mistresses because they were primitive and slutty. But upper class white women didn't have a libido, didn't have orgasms, hence the sort of famous old chestnut about you told a woman on her wedding night in England, lie back and think of England. Just do your duty to God and your country and your husband and allow him to do it to you and just, close your eyes and ignore it and it'll be over soon. And so the idea that women did not have a sexuality coincides, not surprisingly, with the disappearance of all of the pleasure parts,
Mm.
right? There are textbooks with anatomy illustrations that don't even include the head of the clitoris. And we think this is old stuff, but let me tell you, in the 1970s, when the book The Joy of Sex came out, this was the first crossover bestseller sex book ever.
I remember that book.
Remember that book? In the original version, the original edition, the word clitoris is not mentioned.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, they had some sexual anatomy, but not of the clitoris.
Mm.
So anyway, the bottom line is we've been getting parts back. We got the head of the clitoris first. We still, in many textbooks, don't have the rest of the clitoris. There's 3 parts to the clitoris. And what we don't have is all of the rest of the sexual pleasure equipment. And there's a lot of it.
Mm.
And I like to say basically pound for pound, inch for inch, a female body has as much erectile equipment, that's the part that gets engorged, as a male body. So we all know what penises can do. They can get big and hard, and that's engorgement. And we can see it, and it's obvious. Our bodies, your body, my body, we've got just as much of that engorgeable erectile tissue as any male body does. So that's what we don't have. That's what we don't know. We don't know where it is. We don't understand how it's connected. We don't know how to make it happy. Our partners don't know. And so we've got all kinds of issues that come from we have we have the orgasm gap
Mhm.
where something like 10% of women have not yet found their path to orgasm. And I will mention while I'm saying that, because I think it's so important to understand, if you have not found your path to orgasm yet, you are not broken. There's just stuff you haven't learned. You never
Absolutely.
got you never got a good map. And so you've been wandering around in the woods hoping to find it, but nobody said, here's the map. Or they gave you a map that was wrong. Right? What happens when you have a bad map? You think there's something wrong with you instead of going, oh, this map sucks. So, and then we have a larger percentage of women where we can have orgasms sometimes, but not all the time. And it becomes something that there with a lot of anxiety around it because maybe I will, maybe I won't. And so again, what I call orgasmic proficiency is learnable. We
Hmm.
learn to get to our orgasm, to always get there one way or another. And then once we've learned that, we can learn orgasmic mastery,
Hmm.
where we can discover this whole wide realm of orgasm, where we've got many, many different pathways to get to orgasm. And, and we can develop advanced orgasmic skills like female ejaculation or having orgasms with intercourse or having orgasms from giving oral sex, having orgasms from nipple stimulation or hands off orgasms, all burnable stuff.
That is fascinating. Thank you so
I
much for that back history. It is fascinating and it's so enraging. I hear from a lot of the
know.
women I work with, and it's been my experience when especially the history being erased from medical textbooks, right? When we go and talk to our doctors, especially in the menopause transition, and we're starting to experience changes, discomfort, pain, that those conversations are so difficult to have with our doctors because our doctors don't have the language or the even the knowledge with which to address those topics, and we ourselves don't know how to initiate those conversations. Your book is an excellent guide for knowing our equipment, as you say, and
Mhm.
really empowering ourselves with the language, the knowledge, so we can initiate those conversations, really take ownership over those conversations in the bedroom and outside the bedroom. I
The
so
way
you,
that
you
let me jump in. I just most doctors, including gynecologists, family practice doctors, have never had more than an hour of class about
yes.
menopause
Yes.
and have never had more than maybe an hour or two of class about sexuality.
Yes, I've heard that from doctors themselves, yes.
I
I
mean,
know that.
this is like, what are they learning?
Mhm.
If you're not learning, they don't know how to take a sexual history. They don't know how to give information and resources. They don't know how to help people with some things that are some of them are complicated, but some of them are not that complicated. But they don't know. So we need to educate our medical professionals as well as ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I actually had a conversation with, in episode number 4 with Dr. Shazadi Harper, who, is very well versed in sexual health and sexuality for women in the perimenopause to menopause stage, and um, she advocates for doctors really sitting down, knowing that women are going to put those questions, those concerns about their
Mhm.
libidos, about sexual health at the bottom of their list when they come in. So just elevating those questions to the top of the list, right? Just using that as a starting point, right? Or
Yeah.
just even asking, how
Asking
is
asking would
yes.
be
Ask.
good. Asking would be great, but you can't expect it, and especially now that most doctors have so little time with patients.
Mm,
So they're not comfortable with the subject matter either. So
mm.
yes, it behooves them to go to classes, get educated, learn about this, and initiate these conversations.
Yeah,
Um,
and I know
yeah.
some doctors. I've recommended your book to several doctors. So
I,
you mentioned the Female Erectile Network. I would love for you to talk about that and how it differs from male bodies. I would love our listeners to learn more about that. What does it look like, feel like? How do we access it?
okay. So what? First, I'll just say, if you go to my website, you can look at blog posts where I have illustrations.
Mhm.
Or you get my book, or you take the online course, and you can see the drawings that I make because
They're beautiful drawings.
oh, thank you. I'm really delighted that my art came back into my life in that way. So I will describe it to you briefly,
Mhm.
but it's going to be helpful to go look at those drawings. But what I'm going to show you the pussy pillow. Um, so, so this is I made her decades ago. She's really old.
Oh,
Okay,
she's homemade. Love it.
yeah, I made her. Okay, so the things that we start with are the things we know and on the outside, and that would be the head of the clitoris. So this is just one part of the clitoris, right there. Now, for some women, it's going to be under the hood. Some women, it's out, all normal. Um, and what I'd like to suggest to women is that you actually go on a tour of your own anatomy. And again, you can read about this in the book or in the course. But I want you to find and feel all the parts I'm talking. And that way you'll become your own expert. And that way nobody can tell you, oh, you don't have that. Because you'll know, oh, yeah, I felt it. I know that I have it. But in order to do that, you're going to have to go through the journey of arousal because all the parts we're talking about are made of erectile tissue. So when it's not engorged, it's small and soft and squishy. We're not going to
Mm.
find most of it. We'll find the head of the clitoris. That one's easy. But a lot of the rest of the stuff is going to change. So I do recommend that you do your home play assignment of going on this little tour in 3 stages. Check it all out when you're not engorged, not aroused. Play with yourself, get medium level aroused, check it out again. Play with yourself more, get all the way almost having an orgasm, check it out again. And I really suggest that you not just feel, but that you look. You get a light and a magnifying mirror. You can use your phone, but see what is there. And then if you have a partner, take them on a tour the next time. The first time, go by yourself so you can really pay. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find the head of the clitoris. You're going to look at it. You're going to notice size, shape, color, sensitivity, position. Then what you're going to do is right above the head of the clitoris, under the hood, you're going to feel right here. And under here is the shaft. And it's about 1 inch long. It's about the thickness of a chopstick or a pencil. And you can feel it under the hood by rubbing your finger back and forth or squeezing. You can give it a little tiny hand job. This is wonderful stuff to play with right here. It's erectile tissue, but it's not as hypersensitive as the head of the clitoris, right? Because sometimes the head of the clitoris is too sensitive, right? Sometimes we want less stimulation, sometimes more. It depends. Depends on our arousal level. Okay. Next, the clitoris branches into 2 branches like that, like a wishbone. And in fact, if we were looking at the bones, if we're looking at the pelvis, see this arch right here? No? Okay. The legs of the clitoris anchor to this arch like that, right? So the head of the clitoris is going to stick out like that. And then we've got the legs here, and they're about 3 or 4 inches long. Now, when you're feeling aroused and you're not aroused at all, you probably won't feel them. Mid-level arousal, maybe. High-level arousal, when you take your fingers and you just spread them out a little and you feel underneath, that's where you're going to, there's something there. Oh, it feels nice to rub that and press that. Now, you're not going to be able to feel the whole length of it because they angle back, but you're going to be able to feel the tops at high-level arousal. Now, to find the rest of the erectile tissue, we're going to have to be looking and feeling under the skin and the fatty tissue and the muscles. So that's a little harder to envision on the model. And I'm taking out the diagrams. So you're going to have to look at it. But underneath the labia on either side are these big bulbs of erectile tissue. Bulbs right under here. And when you play with them, they get so big and they get so puffy that the first time you do it, you're going to go, oh my. Because nobody told me there was anything good to play with under there.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, I didn't play with it. Nobody played with it. But now we know. And so you can rub, you can press, you can squeeze, you can use your whole hand. This is when you have like if you're playing with a partner and their whole thigh is pressed up against your crotch. And you can squeeze, you can have a finger inside or 2 fingers inside the vaginal opening and the other finger out here and squeeze and play with it. And they're big and puffy right here on either side of the vaginal opening. Interesting. Because what happens when these are big and puffy, then if you've got something moving in and out of the vagina, it's going to feel pretty awesome. What if they're not engorged? It can feel okay, but it's not going to feel insanely wonderful. And that's kind of a good indicator. If you're playing with a partner and there's penetration and these bulbs are not big and puffy and it doesn't feel awesome, you shouldn't be in there yet. Early penetration.
That's permission, right?
Well,
We should ask for permission before.
that would be ideal. In fact, our partners should get us to beg.
Yes.
right? We should be at the point where we're desperate to have something inside. That's the right.
Mm.
Before that, we're not really ready. Now, once we do go inside, there's more erectile tissue inside. There's erectile tissue above the roof of the vagina. So that would be in and up. So if you were
Mhm.
doing this on ourselves, we put our fingers in and go up. And that is the erectile tissue that people are commonly calling the G spot.
Mhm.
I hate that name because the man Grafenberg who discovered it doesn't have any, and he described it incorrectly anyway. It's not a
Uh-huh.
round dime-sized spot. It's actually a tube of erectile tissue that
Mhm.
surrounds the tube of the urethra. It's almost like a roll of paper towels. And in fact, when it's really engorged from the outside, you can see around the urethral opening here, there's almost like a raised ring, like a stage, which is like the end of the roll of paper towels. And when it's engorged and you put your fingers in and you go up, you can feel along the length of the tube
Mhm.
and put your fingers a little bit apart and kind of feel the gutters on either side. So that's the urethral sponge. That's what I prefer to call it. There's also erectile tissue under the floor. And you get to that by putting your thumb in and pushing down, in and down. And you're probably going to have to go in anywhere from a half inch to an inch and a half to find it. If you're open to it, you can put your other finger in your butt. And you don't have to do that if you're not open to it. But if you do, if you have one finger in each hole, you'll feel there's a fat part of the wall between the two canals. That's where the erectile tissue is. If you go past it, the wall gets very thin. And that's how you know where that is. And so that's the Female Erectile Network. And what
Thank you
you
for that.
Hmm?
Thank you for that. That's such a beautiful description.
and what you might notice is you actually got these kind of circuits. You've got a cuff of erectile tissue that goes around the vagina and a second overlapping, interlocking circuit of erectile tissue up here. So you've got these overlapping, interlocking circuits of erectile tissue. And if you want to have the best arousal, if you want to have the best orgasms, you want that whole network activated.
Mhm.
Now, one of the things that's different about female and male erectile tissue is a penis, it's kind of an all or nothing system. You can't have the head be hard and the shaft be soft. Doesn't work that way. Either the whole thing is hard, the whole thing might be semi hard, but you can't have one part hard and one part soft. With the female erectile network, because they are separate but connected structures, you can get aroused and orgasmic with just part of this network activated. And I think probably my experience is not uncommon. But for many years, when I first became sexually active, I was having some orgasms sometimes with clitoral stimulation, which was great. I'm all for it. There's no bad orgasms. It's not the wrong way to have an orgasm, but it was like singing and playing the guitar. It sounded great. It was beautiful music, but it wasn't until I had the whole band playing, right? The whole
Mm.
orchestra activated that I realized how much bigger and broader and more depth and more variation and more pleasure was available when you get the whole thing working for you.
Mhm. Beautiful. I love that explanation. Thank you so much. And I can't help but think, when I'm listening to you talk about this home play, which sounds to me very exciting. But for many women I speak to, they may feel a bit shy or harbor some resistance or even shame about self pleasuring. Can you give us some tips on how to get started or how to release some of that shame or shyness or resistance?
Well, the shame is a big factor. We have so much
Mhm.
shame. It's been dumped on us from when we were babies, from when our primary caregivers were changing our diapers. We started getting shame about our genitals and
Mhm.
our bodies. And then it just, it went from there. It's been this absolutely omnipresent, relentless barrage of shaming. So I'm amazed to find anybody who doesn't have shame, right? So the first thing to know is it's really normal to feel that way. The second thing to know is the way that we grow and liberate ourselves is by doing things that scare us,
Mm,
things that we're anxious about. Courage is not the absence of fear. It means we do the thing anyway. And in fact, courage is one of our heart skills. The French word courage, it's heart. And it means that we do it because we love ourselves. We do the hard thing.
absolutely.
We push through the shame. We push through the anxiety, the fear, all of the thoughts that stop us and block us. There's that point in our life where we just go, no more. I'm going to do it, even though I feel weird, even though I feel ashamed, even though I feel shy, even though I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Now, I know for a lot of women, there's a certain point that we reach in I think in our 40s, for a lot of us,
Mhm.
where we start being like, I don't care what other people think. I don't give a shit what you think. I'm going to do what's right for me. And I think for a lot of women, that starts there. If it
Mhm.
start younger, it would be ideal if it started younger. Um, and for most of us, if we cultivate that, by the time we get to menopause, we're pretty fierce. And if we haven't found our fierceness yet, this is the time. This is
Mm,
the time to kind of go, like, so what? I don't care what you think. I don't care what you say. This is when I'm going to have healthy self-love, healthy boundaries, powerful communication, and I'm going to find and access all of the pleasure and that is it's capable of. I'm capable of. When I used to be a clinician and women would say to me, like they got it that I was a little different
mhm.
than their average care provider. And so they would say to me, they would be like, I I don't have they would always whisper. And I would be like, well, do you self pleasure? They'd go, no, ew, that's my boyfriend's job. And I would go,
Mhm.
well, that's how you learn. That's how you learn. Then I would take out my prescription pad. This is the old days when we had pads of paper. And I would write on the prescription pad, self pleasure minimum 3 times a week. And I would hand it to them because I wanted them to know they had permission from an authority figure.
Mm,
We don't need permission from an authority figure. We're our own authority here. So I want everyone to give themselves permission to explore, to experiment, to make mistakes. Mistakes are fine. That's how we learn. Mistakes are absolutely how we learn. And feeling awkward is okay. And not knowing what you're doing is okay. And just approaching it with that kind of childlike, playful, exploratory wonder that we all had at a certain point. And instead of ruminating around all this negative stuff. And we can learn how to reprogram our brain. There are all kinds of ways that we can shift those old limiting beliefs and thoughts and that programming that I call it radio fuck you. You know, the voice in your head, oh, you can't do
yes,
that. You shouldn't do that. Oh
yes,
my goodness.
yes.
Woman, you're you shouldn't dress like that. Whatever. Oh my God, my boobs are too big. Oh my boobs are too small.
Mhm.
Whatever. You know,
Mm,
what will they think? We gotta turn that self-critical, negative voice into a positive one. And
absolutely.
won't happen overnight, but we can reprogram that radio station.
Mm, mm,
Then we can turn it to, a positive radio positivity and really something that celebrates um
abs
what we've got and what we're capable of.
mm. Yeah, I always say just lean into that resistance little by little, and you will experience so much freedom and liberation when you just lean into it. Just lean into, just take
Mhm.
baby steps. And there's so much freedom and liberation on the other side. It's very empowering. I love that. Thank you
It's
so much.
just it's just like
Mhm.
stretching in yoga, right? You
Yes.
don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to tear something. But you just wanna stretch a little bit more. You wanna find that
Mhm.
place of resistance and see if you can melt into it a little bit.
Mhm.
And keep doing it, you become more flexible. If you keep
Mhm.
lifting weights, you get stronger. If you keep practicing your courage muscle, it gets stronger. And so it's really important to that what you just said about leaning into it little steps, one step at a time. And you can get to amazing places by one step at a time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you mentioned menopause and how we, have this attitude of "I don't care anymore," and the limiting beliefs that accompany the menopause transition. And one that I've tried to debunk over and over is that our pleasure and our sex lives are over when we get to menopause. How does menopause transition, in your experience, affect our ability to experience this full female arousal that you speak of?
So again, we've got this challenge of not knowing what's common and what's normal.
Hmm.
So it is common and normal for women to have a decrease in libido. Doesn't happen to everybody. I've known some women who were just as horny when they were old women as they were when they were young women. For most of us, the drive, that libido changes. And I
Hmm.
think that's really important to understand. A, it's normal. Um, there's nothing wrong with you. It is tied to our health, to our, how we're sleeping and eating and exercising and our psychological health and stress. It's tied to all of those things. But it's just really okay to acknowledge I am older and my body is different. Right? When I was 20, I'd go out dancing all night and then go to work the next day.
Okay.
Now, not only could I not go out dancing all night, I don't even want to go out dancing all night. I might want to go dancing, in the middle of the afternoon for a while. But things change, and I think we need to accept that that can be normal. The next thing to understand, especially about libido, this is so essential, I think, is that when I was younger, it was as if there was a fire under my pot of water all the time. My
Mhm.
water was always pretty warm, and it didn't take much to turn that fire up and boil my water. And my libido, my horniness would lead me to having sex with myself or a partner, right? I would be like, gotta get some, gotta do it, and it was a very intense drive. And I didn't have to make anything happen, in fact, but it was there. Now it's as if I want to boil my water, I have to make a choice to do so.
Mm.
I have to go out and collect the wood, build the fire, and then boil my water. And then, yay, it's hot and boiling. Isn't that great? But if I don't make the choice, that conscious choice, could go for weeks without building a fire. And the longer I go, the colder the water gets and the longer it's going to take to heat it up and get it boiling. So we need to start making that conscious choice that we don't need to. I'll reframe that. If we want to, we can make that conscious choice to say to ourselves, it's been a couple days, it's been a couple weeks. I haven't boiled my water. I'm going to do it. And then build the fire. What do we need to do? Well, we might need to read some erotica, or watch porn if that's your thing. If we've got a partner, we might ask our partner to give us a full body massage. Um,
Mhm.
we might want to do a ritual that transitions us into an erotic space. We might want to put on our favorite sexy music or light some incense. We might want to do the things that will help create that internal and external environment of sexiness. Um, and then we will have collected the wood and built the fire. And then we're going to go, oh, this is good. I remember this. I think I
Mhm.
want to make it a practice, just like we might exercise, not occasionally, but regularly, because the more often we do it, the easier it's going to be to do.
Mm.
The more we keep ourselves juicy, the juicier we'll stay. And of course, if we are partnered, that's an important component of relationship health. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean we have to have sex with our partner, multiple times a week. Like maybe we did when we were younger, maybe not. But it's important that we've got the intimacy and the closeness. And sometimes we might just want to have that if we have an intimate partner where we just cuddle, or maybe we get naked and we give each other massages, or we just see what happens without any pressure or expectation. And if we do that, we might find ourselves having sex with our partners more anyway. 'Cause
Mhm.
feel more intimate and close, and one thing might lead to another. So those are all kind of things to keep in mind.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'll throw one more thing in, which is that if we partner with men, they might be having issues with their libido. They might be having issues with their erection. And so we need to be talking about all of this stuff with our partners. Um, I'll just, my vagina just does not lubricate like it used to.
Yeah.
That's just your reality. And so there are things that I do. I make coconut oil suppositories. I drink oat straw tea. I mean, there's some things I do to try and deal with that. But if we're having intercourse, I need to also be able to say, "Oh, that's enough." Yeah, I know
Mhm.
in old days we could have just gone on and on and on, but now, no, my vagina isn't quite as robust
Mhm.
as it used to be. And so we need to be able to communicate that, because if we can't communicate that, what are we going to do? We're just going to avoid sex altogether.
I
Right.
love that. And I wanna talk to you a little bit, about communication in a bit. But what I'm hearing from you is that we need to prioritize pleasure. We need to make time for it to go from that building the fire, building putting the wood together, starting to
Mhm.
create a little simmer, let
Mhm.
it go to a very soft
Mhm.
boil. It
Mhm.
may go to, a rapid boil, but that I've boiled water before. It takes time. Sometimes I'm just sitting and like, would you hurry up and boil? So I know it's really important to go
Mm.
slow and gently, take your time. And there's
Mhm.
so often this pressure in our minds to race to the finish line, which is often modeled by porn, Hollywood
Yep.
movies. Um,
Now
I've heard
sexuality.
yeah, yep, I've heard you talk about I've heard you say this in another interview, the pandemic of premature penetration, which you talked about. And
And
and I
it
totally
gets
love that.
worse if we have a partner with erectile challenges.
Mm,
So, if they have erectile challenges and they have a hard on, we might be like, "Oh, well, we gotta put it in right now.
exactly,
I'm really
exactly.
ready or not." Instead of being able
Mhm,
to go, "Well, I'm not ready, so maybe there'll be a hard on later, maybe not. That's okay. We can have a lot of fun and pleasure, whether there's a hard on or not. We can have a lot of sexy fun, whether there's intercourse or not."
mhm.
Um, but we need to still be a really good guardian of our own gate, and know when we're engorged enough, when we're aroused enough to have it feel awesome, to have that kind of sexual activity.
And removing that limiting belief, I know it comes up for me, that one of the obstacles to full arousal is that belief that, oh my gosh, it's taking me too long.
Oh, yeah.
I'm taking too long, so I forfeit my pleasure, and I'm like, okay, go ahead, go for it, and you're left feeling like something's wrong with you. So again, voicing, communicating where you are and that arousal path,
Mhm.
educating ourselves and our partners so we get to a place where it feels good for both of us. But,
Mm.
um, it does I think with practice, it we can get a little bit, more efficient, but how long would you say it takes to get to that full arousal state?
That's exactly where I was gonna go. For most women, 30 to 45 minutes.
Mm,
And
okay.
I would tell you, I've taught a lot of classes over the years. Every single time I say that, the class gets everyone's like, and you'll see some women are there with a male partner, and you can see them like give them a little elbow, like, "See, told you." Um, so that is what's normal, and for many heterosexual couples, their entire erotic encounter from beginning to end, every single part of it is about 12 minutes.
Mhm.
12 minutes. For most of us, it takes 30 to 45 minutes to get all the way aroused and gorge. We're not taking the time we need. And it is an important reframe, because again, we've got this weird porn model, which is all intercourse focused. And when they're filming those things, they don't even turn the camera on until the porn actress has been playing with the vibrator for 30 minutes, getting warmed up. They
Mhm.
don't show that part, but that's what's happening in real life. So we need that reframe, and we need the reframe of it's not about being in a rush. It's about enjoying the journey. and taking our time. And the other piece of it is, so conversely, is how do we learn to either get more aroused more quickly or more thoroughly, right? How do we learn how to use our tools, our internal skills to get really turned on? And not even necessarily more quickly, but more deeply, more thoroughly. Like
Mm.
in 30 minutes, you could get nicely turned on, or in 30 minutes, you can get wildly and deeply turned on when you know how to use your own toolkit.
Mhm.
And I've got to say, also, I have found with menopause that I am really glad I know how to use my toolkit because some things that used to work just don't work the same. But I've got lots of other things that I can try. And so I've been very grateful that I know how to use breath and sound and pelvic floor muscles and my intention and my focus and awareness and how to get my arousal to expand with those kinds of tools and skills.
Mm.
Um, like I said, because there's some things that just I mean, the example I just gave before, which it was with the intercourse is my vagina's got kind of a limit now. No matter what I do and what other all the wonderful little looby things I do, there is a limit. And so it's really great to know when it is appropriate to start. Like starting early is going to be a really bad idea now. I could have gotten away with it when I was 20. Can't get away with it. If I start and my vagina is not ready to start, that's a terrible idea. But
Mm.
even when she is, there's a certain point where it's just like, she's had enough. She's like, okay, can we take a break now? And
Mhm.
it's really useful to know all these other ways that my partner and I can pleasure each other and ways that I can use my tools and skills to transfer the pleasure and the sensation, right? Like you can learn to have orgasms from breast stimulation and nipple stimulation. And sometimes if your vagina is kind of like, I need a little break, it's like, great, I've got other parts that can serve that function. And so we can switch to
Right.
that because we know how to do that. So the more we learn, really what I want to say is the more skills we learn, the easier it's going to be to make these transitions to discovering new ways to play or new patterns when the old stuff just isn't quite working the same way anymore. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yes, we can get creative, and that's so much fun exploring new ways. And
Hmm.
I huge advocate for yeah, the breath, the movement, pausing in between and changing
Mm.
positions, doing a little dance, go from standing to just a different part of the room and make it a beautiful dance, of exploring what is fun and what turns you on. You mentioned orgasms earlier, and I know they can change for us in midlife. I know for some women, they say to me that it becomes harder to orgasm. The orgasms are more muted. But then I also hear from women in their 50s and 60s that their orgasms are even better than before. How is it possible to improve the quality of our orgasms as we age? And why are they so good for us?
Okay, so I think all the tools and skills I was just talking about are the ways that we keep improving our orgasm and we keep
Mhm.
expanding our orgasm skills no matter what our age. So again, I think some women it just kind of naturally comes to them, or maybe they feel more liberated and freer and more comfortable in their body. And the pathways, the arousal pathways become more assured for them. For other women, that kind of the decrease in libido and the more fragile vagina and all the other issues of aging bodies or other health issues can get in the way of the orgasms. So becomes again more important than ever, I think, to really practice what I call sex craft skills. You're
Mhm.
you're you're developing mastery of all of the different ways that you can get turned on, get aroused, and have orgasms. I think the other piece of this is recognizing that some things just change, and that is just part of getting older, and maybe you've got health issues that are impacting your sexuality, And so sometimes we just need to learn how to maximize what's available to us. So, for example, if you have a male partner and he no longer can get an erection, how do you find all of the wonderful ways to play with a soft penis and still have lots of sexual satisfaction? So I think, and not be sitting there, being pissed off or annoyed or embarrassed because it's not like it used to be. So I think there's also some acceptance in that.
Mm, that's
And
beautiful. That acceptance, definitely.
there's one other thing you said that I know I wanted to go back to, and no, it is escaping me. Um,
Why are they so good for us?
that's it. Thank you. Good, good. Well, that. So orgasms basically do all of the good things that all the stuff we're being told to do for our health does.
Hmm.
Uh, Aerobic exercise, meditation. It's good for our circulatory system and our cardiovascular health. It's good for our emotional, psychological health. It's an antidepressant. It's anti-anxiety. So basically, if it wasn't sex, and with all the baggage that that has in our culture, our medical professionals would be saying, have at least 3 orgasms a week minimum, to really be healthy. And and the bigger, better the orgasms are, the more we get that psychological, biochemical boost. So having an orgasm of any kind is awesome. Having a longer orgasm, a more powerful orgasm is even better.
Hmm.
Learning how to have an orgasm that just keeps going or have repeated orgasms, even better. So especially if you're looking for that and the endorphins, and that kind of mental, emotional, psychological, antidepressant, anti-anxiety effect, it's
Hmm.
really worth it to learn how to have expanded orgasms.
Hmm.
You have
Hmm.
expanded orgasms, you can feel great for days afterwards.
Hmm.
And I'm not knocking the pills and all the other things that we have to treat those conditions, but an orgasm is good for every part of your body and there's no side effects.
Thank you for that. What are your views? And they can be done partnered or solo, right? What are
Yeah,
what are
very
you
important.
on
Very, really important.
what are your views on the use of vibrators to get there?
I think vibrators are wonderful little tools to have in our toolkit. And I think it's really great to have options. But
Hmm.
sometimes I want to take a leisurely walk.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm going to ride my bike. Other times I'm going to hop in the car. Right. So it
Yeah.
depends what your motivation is. Like, how fast do you want to get there? Vibrators are great also for learning the pathway to orgasm. For women who have not yet found their path, a vibrator is often a wonderful tool to use to find that path. But here's the but. The but is this. Well, if we go wander around through the woods and we find our path to orgasm, we're like, oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. And then we're going to go do the same thing again the next day. And then the day after that, and the day after that. After a while, we've
Mhm.
developed path. That's great. Path is useful. But what happens if we go down that same path over and over again? It becomes a rut. And we keep in that rut, then it becomes a trench. And then we think there's no other way to get there. And so
Mhm.
the downside of vibrators is if that's our only path, eventually we're in the trench. So we don't want it to be our only path. We want sometimes to be able to walk there. Sometimes we want to ride the bike. So if your vibrator is your only path, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying now you can use that to learn to expand your pathways.
Mhm.
For example, you use your vibrator, you get to medium level arousal, turn your vibrator off, use your hand, use your breath and sound and pelvic floor muscles. Just kind of pay a little attention to your arousal level. When it starts to drop, you put the vibrator back. You get more turned on, you get high level arousal. Take a little break for your vibrator, use your hands, breathe, sound, imagine, and see where you get to. Your arousal drops, put the vibrator back on. Now you're using your vibrators like a training tool to train yourself. Okay, so now one day you just realize I don't need the vibrator. I can get there just using my hand. Now you've got 2 paths, the vibrator and your hand. Now let's make a third path. Okay. Maybe you would like to learn how to have nipples stimulation lead you to orgasms. Well, use your
Mm,
vibrator while you're stimulating your nipples. Intermittently remove the vibrator. And that's how you can learn how to have orgasms with intercourse, orgasms from getting blowjobs, orgasms, energy orgasms, right? You're training yourself. And so the vibrator can be a wonderful tool in your toolkit. You just don't want it to be your only tool.
mm. Yeah, it's about creating those new pathways of arousal instead of taking that well-trodden path that somehow, disappears after going over it so many times. That's great advice. I love the idea of alternating between hands and vibrator. And what about accessing other arousal points? You mentioned earlier the G spot, you mentioned squirting. Are those possible for us in midlife, do you think?
Absolutely. So the squirting thing is so really interesting. So when I was a midwife, first a midwife, well, those many years ago, and would see, seeing patients for gynecology too. And I would occasionally have women who came in and would say, when I'm having sex, I get these big gushes. And other doctors told me I was peeing. And I would say, well, does it smell like pee? And they'd say, no. Is it yellow? No. Um, then you're just juicier than other women. Just enjoy it.
Mhm.
Then this was, this is before computers, like the old days. Then in the world of porn, I started hearing about this woman, Annie Sprinkle, who could
Mhm.
female ejaculate. And I went, yeah, right. It's probably just me. Well, couple years go by, and I meet some women who start telling me, because now I'm in sex world, right? I'm transitioning from midwife to sex teacher. And I meet women who tell me, oh yeah, I ejaculate. Really, you do? And then what I started to think was, oh, there are some women who are natural ejaculators. And those are the women I was coming across before. But the rest of us, I don't do that. And then I started meeting women who told me I learned how to ejaculate. I didn't know I could. And that got my interest because at that point I'd already learned all this other stuff, right? I learned how to have energy orgasms and orgasms from sucking cock and just all this crazy stuff. So I'd already learned crazy orgasm skills, right? All learnable. It's not, I just have to just mention it's not that the orgasm fairy just came and sprinkled orgasms, right? It's all learnable and I learned it. Um, so once I heard it was learnable, I was like, all right, if it's learnable, I'm gonna learn how to do it. Now there were no books at that point about it. I was just talking to people and getting their input and advice and I was on the hunt for buried pleasure. I was on this discovery of all these missing pieces and I had um learned about the urethral sponge and I started putting it together and realizing, oh yeah, that's where it comes from. And so lots of stimulation to the urethral sponge, marathon sex, lots of orgasms in one day.
Mm.
And I was like, whoa, that's cool. Messy, cool.
Mhm.
Um, and then it got easier and easier to do. Again, I talk about it in the book, I talk about it in online classes, but um there's a lot of stimulation to the urethral sponge. That's where the ejaculate comes from. We actually have glandular tissue in that erectile tissue. It's the same
Mhm.
structure that in male bodies becomes the prostate gland.
Mhm.
So in female bodies, some people call it the female prostate. I think we should call the thing they have the male urethral sponge, just for occasionally have something in their bodies named after our bodies.
Mhm.
But so there's these little glandular tubules inside that erectile tissue. And this was so I had learned about this stuff and I was studying tantra and in tantra they call this fluid amrita, the
I'm
nectar
right.
of life,
Mhm.
right? The sacred medicine. And they would collect it in sexual rituals and drink it
Mm.
and pour it over them as a blessing. And so I would say to the tantra teachers, well, where does it come from? And they would go, oh, it's a gift from the goddess. And I go, yeah, but where does it come from? In the body, like the anatomy. They had no idea.
Mhm.
So I had learned how to do it. And, I'm this anatomy junkie and I've been on this quest for figuring out all this missing stuff for a bunch of years at that point. And so I was having sex and really tuned in to that tissue, that specific tissue. And I all of a sudden realized just before I ejaculate, it feels just like letdown in my when I had been breastfeeding, whatever
Mm.
before. So if you've ever breastfed a baby, right before the milk lets down, there's this like microscopic
Mhm.
tingling in your breasts.
Mhm.
Any woman who's breastfed and I say that, they go, uh-huh. And anyone who hasn't is like, okay, whatever. But all of a sudden I realized that's what it feels like. And then I thought, oh, well, how do we make breast milk? We've got glandular tubules right next to capillaries that become engorged when we're nursing.
Mhm.
And part of the blood goes through the membrane, the wall of the capillary, and into the wall of the tubule, the glandular tubule, mixes with the glandular substances, and in our boobs makes milk. How much milk? As much as we need. How does it come out? It gushes.
Mhm.
Right? Shh, shh, shh. We have 2 babies, twice as much milk. And the same thing, that's one of the ways you know that female ejaculate is not pee. I have a limited amount of pee. I pee and then I'm done, and I can't pee again for a little while. With ejaculate, you can keep going, especially if
Mhm.
you're drinking, just like breastfeeding. And the
Mhm.
same thing happens when you're breastfeeding, you get really thirsty. You're like breastfeeding, you're like chugging water. Same thing happens if you're female ejaculate a lot. Suddenly you're like, oh my God, give me water. And if you
Make
keep
sure you
hydrating,
keep doing your electrolytes. It's
you're
okay.
right. So, right. So, yeah, so that's where it comes from. It comes from those glands inside the urethral sponge.
And
And
it's
and
an
wait,
go
this
ahead.
isn't okay. I believe all women make at least a small amount of this fluid, and I believe it's antimicrobial
Mm.
because it is squirting into the urethra, the place where we get urinary tract infections,
Mhm.
right? And I believe Mother Nature is pretty smart about this whole body thing. And when we've got a portal where germs can enter and potentially kill us, because urinary tract infection will become a kidney infection, which will kill you in 3 days, we've got glands that produce fluid right into the urethra. So I believe that that fluid is antimicrobial, just like breast milk is. And that when they talked about the Amrita as being sacred medicine, they weren't kidding. It is. Okay.
Fascinating.
Right?
And and it's something that you can do yourself with this technique that you described earlier, possibly,
Mhm.
right? Going in between the vibrator, using your finger. It's something that you can do for yourself. It's so much fun to do it with a partner as well.
I
But
say if you're
it
doing it yourself, you want one of those G-spotter toys, the kind of curved
Mhm.
toy,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
using your well, if you're really a yogi person, so really flexible, you might be able to like really stimulate your own urethral sponge for a while. For most of us, it's easier to use a curved toy
Yes,
for that
yes.
internal stimulation. But
Mhm.
all the other parts you can do with whatever.
How much fun is that? And you describe that in your book, right? And in your courses, you take women through that. Is that
I
right?
do. I do.
I wanna make sure we
Okay. Can I
talk
get one
about
more thing in?
yes,
One more
yes,
really
yes.
quick one? Okay. And as I'm saying this because for in the United States, women of a certain age, we might not have a uterus anymore.
Mm.
Got one of the highest rates of hysterectomy in the world. If you don't have a uterus, I am sorry. You can still have amazing sex. You're missing one instrument from your orchestra. You've got the rest. But the uterus is a player in arousal and orgasm. And if you still have yours, hang on to it unless there's a really good reason to take it out. If you've got a cancer there, absolutely take it out. But if you've got some fibroids or something else like that going on, a benign condition, and you're being told you don't need that uterus anymore, got nothing to do with sexual pleasure. That's what the doctors are taught. That's what they'll tell you. We should just take it out. What the heck? Let's just get the ovaries out too while we're at it. They're just little pine bombs in there. And so we have all these women getting their uterus out and they don't
Mm.
need to. And it
Yes.
will affect your sexual pleasure,
Mhm.
as well as other things. It's an architectural feature of your pelvis. right?
Yes,
It's like,
and I've seen how you do it in your classes, how you show that little diagram of the uterus moving up and down while
mhm,
it's experiencing the contractions
yes,
of orgasm, and how you say that's the base note of
exactly.
your orgasm. You feel it. I
Yeah,
love that. Yeah, it's interesting how quick doctors go to hysterectomy as an option. For postmenopausal women, we can experience postmenopausal bleeding. I've
sure.
experienced that twice, and
Mhm.
that's been given to me as an option. And I say, no, I don't want that as an option, please. And
And
I said, I'd like,
did they tell you it wouldn't affect your sex life?
they told me, I go, and I asked one doctor, I go, well, would you take, I just asked her, what, out of curiosity, would you remove, because I know you can do a partial hysterectomy or the whole hysterectomy. And they said, yeah, we would remove the uterus, the cervix. You don't need your cervix. It's not, you don't need it for sexual pleasure. I'm like, that's not what I've experienced. I'm keeping my uterus and I'm keeping my cervix. And I've
Mhm.
heard other doctors have told me there's no studies have shown that the cervix is not indicative of orgasm. There's no anecdotal evidence. I guess women just don't know how to access it right for that
The
purpose.
the
So that
doctors are
means it
just
doesn't
wrong.
exist.
This is one of
Oh,
those examples where I say where they
yes.
get something wrong, and then they're just attached to it, and they keep believing it and teaching it. If your uterus is gone, there you will experience a difference because the uterus
Mhm.
moves during orgasm.
Yes.
And so this whole, um, not knowing that is one of the many ways not having this information affects women, affects our health, affects our pleasure. And I just had to throw that in because it's so common. And what I like to
That,
say to women, if
yeah.
you're being told to get your uterus removed for a reason other than cancer, you need to find other options. And they're out there. There's a wonderful organization called HERS, HERS,
Mhm.
hysterectomy education resource and something else.
I'll look it up and make sure I include it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if you're being told that you need a hysterectomy, you go to that website, you do your research, and you get yourself educated and you find a provider that's going to help you keep your uterus.
Mhm.
Just no reason to just be taking them out wholesale like they're just don't have any other function.
But for women who have had hysterectomies or women
Yeah.
who have undergone treatment for cancer, I know for a lot of them it can be a challenge to reconnect with their sexual pleasure, but they want it, they desire that. How it is still possible, right? It is still possible. I think the information you give in your book is very helpful for
Mhm.
continuing that kind of being that detective of your pleasure, as you say, right?
That's
We
great.
can
Yeah.
continue doing that,
Mhm.
exploring and being a detective in our pleasure, even though we don't have our uterus. So I don't want women to feel like totally let down that that's happened to them. It's still
I
possible.
totally agree. Every other instrument in your orchestra is still there.
Yes,
So learn how to play them.
yes,
Learn how to
yes,
use
yes,
all of the rest of your equipment, and you can still have amazing, amazing music.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, just before we finish, how can we communicate with a partner about what we are discovering about our pleasure? How do we invite them in to this exploration of our buried treasure?
Well, first of all, this is another muscle we need to exercise, our
Mhm,
communication skills muscle. And this I teach, classes. We could talk about this for hours.
mhm,
But simple things I will say is it takes some courage, usually.
mhm.
You may be talking about something you've never talked about before. We might be feeling anxious or worried. So any conversation like that, it's always good to start with telling the truth about how you're feeling at the moment and why you're having this conversation, which might go something like, sweetie, I really want to talk to you about our sex life, but I kind of feel really weird about doing it. I'm worried you're
Mhm.
going to feel criticized. I don't know how to say it. It's like a whole thing. And, but I think it's important because I think we could have even more pleasure. Right. So starting from that place, like just being honest. I think it's really great for partners to think of themselves as like being a musical duo. And if we're
Mhm.
playing music with another person, we don't just expect to sit down and start jamming with them and that's all we ever do. Because that's what sex is. It's a musical improv. But we also, if we're playing with another musician, sometimes we need to talk about what's going on. We need to have a conversation. How's our music going? What could we do better? What are you really enjoying? Have you thought about exploring these other kinds of music? Because I'm kind of thinking about that it would be fun to play this other kind of music, right? So having a conversation with our clothes on about our sex lives. And then what we might discover is that there are some things we want to work on or play with or get better at or practice. And then we can do something that I call a playpen. And that is a time and space where we play a creative learning game. So, what game? Any game we want. How much time? As much time or as little time as we want. It's just we maybe we in our conversation we realized, I'm not really good at making requests. Sometimes we're having sex and there's something I want you to do and I don't know how to ask for it. I don't know what to say. I'm worried you're going to be, insulted. Or I'm thinking, and so I'm getting my arousal's getting turned off because my thinking brain's going. I don't know what to do with that. Well, let's come up with some creative games about feedback. And so maybe you decide let's just start with something really easy. Let's start with foot massage. And you give me a foot massage for 5 minutes, and I don't make any sound. I don't say anything. And then we do 5 minutes where I make sounds of pleasure. And then we do 5 minutes where I also use words of feedback. And then we talk about how'd that go? And then we switch. And then you do me. And
Mhm.
that's a feedback game. And then from that, we might go, that was really useful. What else could we do? And you might play feedback games for the rest of your life. You might play it for a week. There's no right or wrong, but it's the same kind of that creative playfulness we had as kids, right? Because we're out in the woods playing, and you say, "Let's play pirates," and I said, "Well, I wanted to play fairies," and we're like, "Well, let's be pirate fairies," right? There's no limit,
Yes.
right? And my husband and I over the years have developed all these different games, and we've got the might be a game we play all day. We have the ridiculous positive affirmation game where
Mhm.
we just slather positive, like, "Thank you for doing the dishes. Oh my gosh, you have no idea how happy it makes me." And, "Wow, you made dinner. Oh, it's delicious." We just all day long where we just slather each other with ridiculous levels of affirmation for the simple
Mhm.
things, right? Or they could be much more serious games where it's like, "I would like you to watch me pleasure myself.
Mhm.
So you see what I do, and I'll kind of narrate. I'm doing this, and I'm doing it this way because it feels like that. And now I'm changing it to this. And, um, feedback games are great. Signals, cues, right? Because I don't want to have to stop in the middle and go, honey, when I asked you to do that more slowly, what I really meant was to do it
Mhm.
like in the middle of sex. You don't want to be doing that. But if during the middle of sex, you ask your partner to do it slow, and they're still doing it way too fast for you, you need a game, right? You need to go in the playpen and play what does slow mean? What does really slow mean? What is super slow? What is ultra slow? And now we know. Now I can go, oh, baby, do that ultra slow,
Oh, I love that game. I'm gonna play it.
right? Right? Because
That's so much fun.
it is so much fun. And it's so important to understand that, during sex, you may ask for your partner to do it slow. And they didn't do it slow. I mean, they
Mhm.
thought we're doing it slow. It's what slow was to them,
Mhm.
right? It was their version of slow, but now you're annoyed because you asked for something you didn't get it. And that's not the dynamic we want to go for. So now
Mhm.
we play the game. Now I can say ultra slow, and now you know what I want. Isn't that
So
fun?
would you pause in the moment and play the game or do the game
Well,
before?
Well, once we realized it was a problem, right? So we had
Mhm.
it lifetimes ago, right? We're having sex and I asked him to do something slow and he does it again. And I'm thinking like, that's not slow. I ask again. He does it again. Now I'm annoyed, right? And the next thing you know, I think we wound up having a fight instead of having sex because I was feeling he's listening to me. He's
Mhm.
feeling criticized. The next thing you know, we're so we're like, okay, well, that wasn't good. Let's make this a game. So then we set up a playpen for the next day or two where we took whatever it was, an hour, half hour, whatever, where we actually did like stroke my leg slowly. And he would do that. And I'd go, okay, now stroke it really slowly. Okay, now super slow, now ultra slow. And then I can do it to him. I'm like, this is what I mean by slow. This is
Mhm.
what I mean by ultra slow, right? And now he knows. And then the next time we don't have to do the whole thing. I can just go ultra slow. He gets it. Or
I making it into a game. That's so good. I love it.
right. Or we have a tap, right?
Mhm.
So he's doing something and it's the speed is too slow. I want it faster. I can tap on an available part of his body.
Mhm.
I don't have to say
Mhm.
anything. He knows this is the rhythm I'm looking for. Oh
Mhm.
wait, now he's getting faster. I don't want him to get faster. I can be like, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
like pull, drip, pull it back, baby. Right? Even
Yeah.
just that, when we want them to keep doing something the same, sometimes it's right, we don't want them to change, but they're getting more excited, so they're doing it faster and harder, and what we
Mhm.
really wanted was the same, so now we can just go, "Stay same, stay the same, keep it the same." Right?
So it's that constant communication, honoring that where you are in the moment. You like to take things very slow and gentle. And,
That's right.
our partners may want to go at a different speed, but it's really meeting each other where we are. Such a beautiful dance that you described. Thank you so much. This has been such an enlightening conversation. I'm so grateful to you for sharing your wisdom. Before we end, I'd like to just pause and ask you something I ask all my guests, and that's for you to reflect and share what brings you pleasure.
Well, oh, there's so many things.
I'm sure.
Well, I'm a sensualist, so I really love,
Ah.
whether it's being massaged or stroked by my partner or petting my cat or eating a piece of mango or something. I
Mm,
love anything sort of sensual. So, like,
mm.
burning some incense or lighting the candles, being in the shower. I mean, anything that's
Mm.
really in that sensual realm makes me very.
Beautiful. Just
Yeah.
incorporating all the senses.
And it's interesting because I'm an artist and I'm doing a lot of drawing. And I realized part of what I love about the drawing is the
Mhm,
sensation of the pen on the paper. Like, I
mhm,
can't have a scratchy pen, that would make me crazy.
mhm.
The pen must be smooth because part
Ah,
of the pleasure of the drawing is not just the drawing, it's that sensation. Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Right.
Please tell us, how can we connect and continue learning from you?
Well, you can go to my website,
Mhm,
intimateartcenter.com.
mhm,
Intimate Arts, plural, center, spelled the American way. And there you can get my book there or on Amazon. I've got a couple of books, the one we talked about, and others. So you can read books. You can also listen to it. I narrated Women's Anatomy of
mm,
Arousal, and you
okay.
can you can download the anatomy images. You can get it on Kindle, but honestly, the physical book is so much better than the Kindle in this case. So
That's
I recommend the physical book over the
mhm,
Kindle.
mhm, mhm,
Um, there are online courses that I recorded, and there's a bunch of them, and they're multi-part, and they go into lots of detail with lots of images and my own anatomy drawings, but also lots of just vintage porn and just vintage erotica. And just they're really fun. And and oh, if you want to talk to me, I do consultations, so you can always contact me and set up an appointment for that. has
Hmm.
a ton of free blogs on the web posts and the web posts. The website blog posts on the website, there we go, that you can read about a lot of the things we were talking about. So if you're really curious about the anatomy thing and you just want to know right away, just go to the website, look up the anatomy blogs, and you'll get some great visual information about some of the things we talked.
Thank you so much. And I can attest after being at several of your classes that you infuse them with such warmth and humor and playfulness, just like you've done here. So thank you so much for everything that you contribute and gift us with your generosity and wisdom to this space of female pleasure. It's been
Uh,
such a pleasure to be here with you today, Sheri. And thank you everyone for listening.